The rain was merciless that night in Lagos, like it had a score to settle.
Sandra's back was pressed against the wall. "You should go," she said. But she didn't mean it, and worse, Ryan knew she didn't mean it. He took a step closer. The kiss was not soft, was not polite. Then the door clicked. Hello, welcome back to African Love Chronicles. My name is Peace, and today I will be your storyteller. Welcome returning subscribers, and if you're new here, subscribe and join this family. We tell stories that are real, that are raw, and that are romantic. You will love it here. Thank you. Let's get right to the story. Clara Obi was the kind of woman who made everything look easy. That was the thing about her. She smiled through the hard parts. Always had. Growing up in Surulere with a mother who worked double shifts at Lagos Island General and a father who had left before Clara was old enough to remember his face, she had learned early that feelings were a luxury and discipline was survival. By 28, she had a first-class degree from University of Lagos, a sleek apartment in Lekki Phase 1 she had furnished herself piece by careful piece, and a job as head of brand strategy at Vantage Group, one of Lagos' fastest growing media conglomerates. She also had Sandra. Sandra Peters had been Clara's best friend since their first year at Unilag, when Sandra had lent Clara her umbrella during a surprise rainstorm and then immediately regretted it because she got completely soaked herself and thought it was the funniest thing in the world. That was Sandra. Generous, loud, chaotic, and somehow the most lovable person in any room she walked into. They were opposite in almost every way. Clara was precise, Sandra was impulsive. Clara planned, Sandra leaped. Clara wore structured blazers. Sandra wore whatever made her feel like a main character. But somehow they fit, like puzzle pieces that had no business connecting but clicked into place perfectly. So when Sandra called Clara on a Tuesday morning in March with a kind of breathless excitement that usually preceded either very good news or a very terrible idea, Clara tucked the phone between her ear and shoulder and kept typing. "I'm engaged," Clara shrieked. Clara's fingers stopped on the keyboard. "Say that again." "I'm engaged, Clara. He proposed last night at Nook. He got down on one knee right in front of the whole restaurant and I literally almost passed out. Look at this ring. I'm sending you a picture. Look at it." Clara's phone buzzed and she looked at the photo. The ring was enormous. Clara blinked at it for a long time. "Sandra," she kept her voice calm, "you've been dating this man for how long?" 4 months. 4 months? Clara, don't use that voice. I'm not doing a voice. You're doing the voice. The one that sounds like you're reading from a week's assessment document. Clara pinched the bridge of her nose. "I just want to make sure you know what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing," Sandra said happily. "I'm marrying Ryan Adeyemi, and you are going to be my maid of honor. You are going to love him. Everyone loves Ryan. Everyone loves Ryan." I would think about those 3 words a great deal over the next 6 months. The first time Clara met Ryan Adeyemi, she almost walked into him. Literally. She was rounding the corner from the elevator bank at Vantage Group head office on a Friday morning, arms full of presentation folder, coffee balanced on top. Already 10 minutes late for a pre-board meeting, and she nearly collided with a broad chest in a charcoal grey suit. She pulled up short, the coffee tattered. A hand shot out steady, fast, and caught it before it could fall. She looked up. He was tall, annoyingly tall, with the kind of face that Lagos society pages had a field day with. sharp jaw, dark eyes, and the effortless look of a man who never questioned whether he belonged in a room. Late 30s, maybe. The kind of age that sat well on certain men like expensive wine settling into itself. Careful, he said, and his voice, low, even slightly amused, did something completely unreasonable to her composure. She took the coffee from his hand, straightened the folders, lifted her chin. "Thank you," she said crisply. "Excuse me." She walked around him and didn't look back. She found out 20 minutes later, in the middle of the pre-board meeting she had rushed to attend, that the man she had nearly collisioned in the hallway was Ryan Adeyemi, the new group CEO who had been appointed 2 weeks ago while she was in Abuja for a client pitch. The man was now technically her boss's boss and Sandra's fiancé. Clara was very still for the rest of that meeting. She told herself the strange, unsteady feeling in her chest was just the coffee hitting her system. She was very good at telling herself things like that. Here is what nobody tells you about falling for the wrong person. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in increments. Small, stupid, insignificant moments that you don't even notice adding up until then you're standing in a conference room at 9 p.m. arguing about the third quarter brand positioning with your boss's fiancé, and you realize with a kind of quiet, devastating clarity, you know exactly how he takes his coffee, that you've memorized the specific pause he makes before he disagrees with someone, that you have, at some point, without your permission, started listening for his footsteps in the corridor. For Ryan, it was the presentation she gave in August. The board had been difficult, 3 members openly skeptical, one actively hostile. Clara had stood at the head of the table for 45 minutes and dismantled every objection with the calm precision of a surgeon. No notes, no flinching, just clear, sharp, brilliant thinking delivered with the particular grace of someone who has spent years learning to make hard things look easy. Ryan had sat at the far end of the table and watched her work, and something in his chest had done something he was wholly unprepared for. He told himself it was professional admiration. He was good at telling himself things like that too. They had an unspoken agreement, the two of them. They were unfailingly, scrupulously professional. They disagreed productively in meetings. They kept appropriate distances in elevators. When Sandra included them both in her wedding planning group chat, a chaotic stream of venue comparison and color swatches and breathless updates, they responded cheerfully and separately and never ever commented on each other's message. They were doing well, right up until they weren't. It was the business trip that undid them. Vantage Group's annual media conference in Lagos, the kind of event that took over 3 floors of Eko Atlantic Hotel for 4 days, all keynotes and networking dinners and deal-making conversations held over glasses of imported whiskey. Ryan and Clara had been co-presenting the group's 5-year vision on day 2. They had rehearsed twice. They were good. They were sharp. They were professionally completely in sync. What they had not accounted for was the power cut that happened at 11 p.m. on day 1, plunging the hotel's event floor into darkness for 3 minutes, and the subsequent evacuation confusion that put Clara alone in a pitch-black stairwell, holding her laptop to her chest and trying very hard not to think about how many floors up they were. "Clara," his voice came up from above her on the stairs. "I'm fine," she said immediately. "I know. I'm coming down to you anyway." She heard him descend, felt him reach the step beside her, felt more than saw him sit down on the step next to her in the dark. They sat in silence for a moment. I don't like the dark, she admitted. She didn't know why she said it. She never said things like that. I know, he said again. She turned her head. She couldn't see him, but she could feel him, the warmth of him, the solidness. How do you know that? Another pause. Longer this time. Because, he said carefully, you always take the window seat in the boardroom, and you leave the office light on even when you step out. And in the parking garage, you walk very fast. The darkness felt very full suddenly. You notice things, she said. About you, he said simply, and then as if he had surprised himself. Yes. Neither of them said anything else. The lights came back on 4 minutes later. They went to their separate floors, but something had been said, something that couldn't be unsaid, and the next 3 days of that conference, they were both excruciatingly aware of it, hovering in the air between them like a question neither of them dared to answer. It was the last evening of the conference. Sandra had called Ryan at dinner, excited and slightly tipsy from a girls' night in Ikoyi, voice carrying clearly enough that Clara, seated 2 seats away, could hear the warmth and happiness in it. She watched Ryan's face as he talked to Sandra, watched him smile, and it was a real smile, fond and gentle, the smile of a man who cared about the person on the other end of that call. Clara excused herself from the table quietly and walked to the bar. She ordered water. She stared at the bar top and had a firm, private conversation with herself about reality and choices and the kind of woman she was intended to remain. She was going back to her room. She was going to sleep. Tomorrow they were flying back to Lagos and everything was going to return to the sensible, properly arranged shape it was supposed to have. She had just reached the elevator bank when the storm hit. Thunder so loud it rattled the windows, lightning that turned the sky white, and then the rain. Lagos rain, the kind that means it, absolute and total and deafening. The elevator opened. She stepped in. Ryan stepped in after her. They stood on both opposite sides. The door closed. Clara, don't. She stared at the floor numbers. I'm not going to say anything. Good. He stopped himself. Are you alright? And that was the thing. That was the precise, specific, infuriating thing about Ryan Adeyemi. He didn't push. He didn't maneuver. He just asked if she was alright. In that low, quiet voice, like her answer genuinely mattered to him. No, she said, before she could stop herself. I'm not. The elevator stopped at her floor. She stepped out. She heard him step out behind her. She turned. Your floor is... I know what floor I'm on. She looked at him. He looked at her. The rain hammered the window at the end of the corridor. This is a terrible idea, she said. I know. We are not doing this. No, he agreed. We are not. They stood there for a long time, and then they walked, not watching, not running, just walking like two people who had run out of arguments to her door. This is where you came in. The glass, the rain, the 6 months of careful distance finally giving way. The kiss that was not soft, not polite, not anything except completely, catastrophically honest. And Sandra in the doorway. Sandra did not cry. That was the thing that haunted Clara the most in the days that followed. She had braced for fury, for screaming, for the scene of what would have been fair, that would have been deserved. What she had not braced for was Sandra's silence. Clara called 12 times over the next 4 days. Sandra didn't answer. She went to Sandra's apartment in Oniru on the 5th day, knocked for 7 minutes. Sandra's housekeeper, with an expression of profound discomfort, said Madame was not receiving visitors. Clara drove home and sat in her packed car in her building's basement for 20 minutes. Then she went upstairs and called her mother in Surulere and said nothing about anything of it. Just listening to her mother's voice talk about small things, the neighbor's new baby, the price of tomatoes, what she was cooking for Sunday, and felt the particular hollow ache of having done something she couldn't undo. At work, Ryan was careful and quiet and professional in ways that cost him visibly. She could see it, the effort it took. She matched it. 2 weeks after the night at Eko Atlantic, he appeared in her office doorway at the end of the day. She ended it, he said. The engagement. Clara set down her pen. I know. Sandra had finally texted her one message. It's over with Ryan. I need time. I'll reach out when I'm ready. Don't call. 3 sentences. Clara had read them 40 times. Ryan came in, closed the door, and sat down across from her. He looked tired, genuinely, deeply tired, in the way that had nothing to do with sleep. I need to be honest with you, he said. Ryan, let me say it. He met her eyes. What happened at Eko Atlantic? That was not something I stumbled into. I know that doesn't make it better. I know it might make it worse, but I need you to know it wasn't an accident. Clara was very still. I have been in love with Sandra's best friend, he said quietly, since the day she almost walked into me in a hallway and looked at me like I was a minor inconvenience. The silence stretched. The city hummed outside the window. Somewhere down in the street, a downfall driver was having a very loud argument. You cannot say that to me, Clara said softly. I know. She is my best friend. I know. She's hot. I know. His voice was rough. I know all of that, Clara. I'm not asking you for anything. I'm not standing here expecting something. I just needed you to know that it was real, that I'm not the kind of man who does things carelessly. He paused. Even when I do the wrong thing. He stood, smoothed his jacket, walked to the door. Ryan. Her voice stopped him. He turned. I need time, she said. A lot of it. He nodded once. No argument, no push. Okay, he said, and he left. Sandra was in a cab on 10 Mainland Bridge, stuck in traffic that had been stationary for so long she was starting to wonder if she should just walk. When her phone lit up with Sandra's name, she answered on the first ring. Hi, Sandra said. Hi, Clara said. A bit. I'm not ready to be okay about it yet, Sandra said. I want you to know that. I know, Clara said. You don't have to be. But I also... Clara stopped. Started again. I've been thinking about this a lot. About me and Ryan. And honestly, Clara, she let out a long breath. I think I knew something was off for a while. I just didn't want to see it. We got engaged too fast. I think I was in love with the idea of him more than the actual him. A pause, which doesn't make what you did okay. It wasn't okay, Clara said immediately. I know that. No, it wasn't. Another pause. But I also know you. I've known you for 10 years, and I know that you would not have. I know it wasn't nothing for either of you. Clara stared at the bridge. The lagoon glittered on both sides. Sandra. I'm not saying it doesn't hurt, Sandra interrupted. It does. A lot. But I've been sitting in my house feeling furious for 6 weeks and I'm tired. I'm genuinely tired, Clara. Her voice softened. I miss my best friend. Clara pressed her hand over her mouth, swallowed. I miss you too, she said. It came out smaller than she intended. She heard Sandra exhale shakily. I need more time. Before we can be. before things can be normal. But I don't want to lose you, okay? I don't want to lose you over a man, even if he's the wrong man and you are the wrong best friend. Her voice broke in a wet laugh. Even then, Clara laughed too, even though her eyes were blurring. Okay, okay. Sandra, what? I'm sorry. I mean it. More than I know how to say. A long pause. I know, Sandra said quietly. I know you are. 3 months had passed. Clara had not reached out to Ryan outside of work. He did not reach out to her. They remained professional, careful, kind in the measured way of two people navigating a thing that had no instruction manual. She thought about him though, more than she wanted to, in the particular involuntary way that feelings you refuse to act on tend to get louder the longer you ignore them. And then one evening in November, a Tuesday, unremarkably, she stayed late, working on a rebrand pitch. She found him sitting alone in the empty rooftop garden of Vintage building, which she hadn't even known he knew about. She went up there sometimes when she needed to think, and she had always assumed she was the only one. He had a bear. He looked up when she appeared, and for a moment, they both stood there. I didn't know you came up here, she said. Same, he said. She should have gone back downstairs. She sat down on the bench beside him instead, not close, a respectful distance. They looked at Lagos spread out below them, the chaos and color of it, the lights threading along the expressway, the dark simmer of the lagoon in the distance, the noise of everything floating up faintly. How is she? He asked. Better, Clara said. She's been seeing someone new, a chef. He's very enthusiastic about fermented things apparently. Ryan made a sound that was almost a laugh. Good. That's good. Silence. Ryan, Clara said. He looked at her. I'm not ready to make any decisions, she said. About any of this. I want you to know that up front. He nodded, waited. But I also... She stopped, started again. I've spent my whole life being careful, making the sensible choice, managing the risks. She looked down at her hands, and I think I'm tired of it. Not in a way that means I'm going to stop being careful, but in a way that means I want to at least be honest. She looked up at him. So honestly, I haven't stopped thinking about you. Not once. Not for a single day since March. The city hummed around them. Ryan set down his beer very slowly like he was afraid to make a sudden movement. I thought about you every day for 6 months before that, he said, and every day since. That's a lot of days, she said. Yes, it is. Another silence. A different kind this time. Not empty, not heavy. Something else. Something tentative and careful and faintly, quietly hopeful. I'm not ready, she said again, to jump into anything. There's still so much. Clara. His voice was very gentle. I'm not asking you to jump. She looked at him. I'm asking you, he said, if you just stay up here for a while with me. That's it. Just tonight. She thought about Sandra. She thought about the complicated, imperfect shape of the thing they were all still navigating. She thought about what it had cost her to be dishonest and what it had cost her for years not to be. She settled back on the bench. Okay, she said. He didn't touch her. He just sat beside her, looking out at the city. But his hand rested on the bench between them. And very quietly, in the dark, after a moment, she put hers on top of it. Sandra was 3 months into a very serious relationship with a fermented food chef, whose name was Patrick and who had, in Sandra's word, the most emotionally stable energy she had ever encountered in a human man. She had recently declared loudly and cheerfully at a Sunday lunch that included both Clara and Patrick that and was only mildly awkward that she was probably going to marry him and he should just start accepting that now. Patrick, who apparently had extremely stable energy, simply smiled and passed the jollof. Clara and Ryan had taken it slow, deliberately, consciously, carefully slow. The kind of slow that felt less like delays and more like intentions. They had dinners, they talked, they disagreed about things and figured out how to do that without the professional veneer. He learned that she cried at documentaries about animals, but not at sad films. She learned that he was a genuinely terrible driver, but refused to admit it. Slowly, imperfectly, in the specific and unglamorous way that real things are built, they built something. It was not the beginning of a perfect story. There was too much history for that, too many complicated loyalties, too many things they had to face and reckon with and sit with in discomfort. Real things aren't clean. Real love, the kind that costs you something, almost never is. But on a Saturday morning in November, 1 year to the month since that rooftop, Ryan looked across the breakfast table at Clara, who was reading something on her laptop with that small, precise frown she got when she was concentrating, wearing an oversized shirt, hair down, completely unguarded in the way she rarely was anywhere else. And he thought, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And across the table, as if she had felt it, Clara looked up. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then she went back to her reading and he went back to his coffee. And outside the window, Lagos was already loud and golden and relentlessly magnificent and life. Some stories don't begin perfectly. Some stories are built from the wreckage of the wrong choices, the honest mistakes, the moments you wish you could take back. But sometimes, not always, but sometimes, what breaks also shows you finally exactly what you're made of and who you want to be made of with. The end. Thank you so much. This is the end of the story. Please like, subscribe for more interesting stories. Thank you.